This morning's call to worship is from Elizabeth Lerner Maclay. She writes, "As drops of rain that find each other and build to become a track, a rivulet, a stream, a river, a sea, so are we drawn together. So are we fortunate to find each other. So are we bound together on this shared passage toward an unknown ocean and eternity." I am so glad that you have joined us this Sunday for water communion and ingathering. Let us worship together. Well, what is water communion? What is ingathering? Every fall, we, like many Unitarian Universalist congregations, celebrate this service. Traditionally, attendees might bring a small container of water, like this. This is some water that was given to me by a congregant who can't be here today, but values this service. So if you didn't bring water, we also provide water. We pour this water into a common vessel together to celebrate our inner and outer journeys, to mingle them together and celebrate those deep connections to one another and, of course, to the earth, because water is life. As climate change accelerates and our water resources change, we have to all remain aware of and take responsibility for protecting our water services. So when we come together on a day like today and we share our water and celebrate our community, it's worth our time to stop and think for a moment about the water itself, its fundamental sacredness, its absolute necessity, and the importance of ensuring the rights of all people to access water they need to live. For this morning's water communion, we will have 4 different times that you may choose to share your water, either the water you brought from home or the water we'll have available. The first is that we will have a chance to share water that reminds us that while some have abundance, others struggle in scarcity. Second, we will have water that symbolizes transitions and movement and change. Thirdly, we'll share water that reminds us of life's storms, our concerns, our worries, our frustrations and losses. And finally, we will share water that reminds us of the well springs of our lives. Please do not worry about which time is right for sharing. The best thing about symbols is that they're open to many interpretations. You can come partake at each of these opportunities or at none. So, if you'd like to partake but you need to remain seated, please just raise your hand and we will bring the waters to you. So, this container, empty of water, reminds us of all who lack access to safe and affordable water, and to all those who are threatened by water contamination, especially right here in the United States. These are our neighbors. These are people one town over, unfortunately. So I dedicate this first water, which was saved from last year's water communion, and the communion before that, and the communion before that. All the way back, there is water here that has been with this church since its founding. And as I pour it into the bowl, I dedicate this water to every form of scarcity in our lives and the lives of our neighbors. Scarcity of safety, scarcity of health care, shelter, and love. To the Desert by Benjamin Alire Saenz. I came to you one rainless August night. You taught me how to live without the rain. You are thirst, and thirst is all I know. You are sand, wind, sun, and burning sky, the hottest blue. You blow a breeze and brand your breath into my mouth. You reach and then bend your force to break, blow, burn, and make me new. You wrap your name tight around my ribs and keep me warm. I was born for you. Above, below, by you, surrounded. I wake to you at dawn. Never break your knot. Reach, rise, blow. Sálvame, mi Dios. Trágame, mi tierra. Salva, traga. Break me, I am bread. I will be the water for your thirst. If you'd like to share water representing scarcity in life or community, please approach from both ends of the table, and you can take turns as you move into the center to pour water. You can also choose to say one or two words into the mic about what your water represents. If yours is a water of journeying, you might consider bringing it to the second installation. But again, you can come to the first, second, third, or fourth communion. They're all here for all of us. And so at this time, I invite you to come forward and share your waters. Thank you so much. The kids can stay in their chairs because I know I always say that the stories are for grown-ups and for kids, and they really, really are. But this one, I think, really speaks to everybody of all ages. It's one of my favorite little parables or stories. This particular version of the tale of the journeying stream was saved from Awad Afifi the Tunisian, and it was printed in Tales of the Dervishes by Idres Shah in 1970. But the version that's repeated here is from the 1800s. A stream in its course from far-off mountains, passing through every kind and description of countryside, at last reached the sands of the desert. Just as it had crossed every other barrier, the stream tried to cross this one, but found that as fast as it ran into the sand, its waters just disappeared. It was convinced, however, that its destiny was to cross this desert, and yet there was no way. And now a hidden voice coming from the desert itself whispered, "The wind crosses the desert, and so can the stream." Well, the stream objected that it was dashing itself against the sand and only getting absorbed. The wind could fly, and that is why it can cross a desert. By hurtling in your own accustomed way, you cannot get across. You will either disappear or become a marsh. You must allow the wind to carry you over to your destination. But how can this happen? By allowing you to be absorbed. You have to allow yourself to be absorbed in the wind. Well, this idea was not acceptable to the stream. After all, it had never been absorbed before. It didn't want to lose its individuality. And once having lost it, how was the stream to know if it could ever be regained? The wind, said the sand, performs this function. It takes up water, carries it over the desert, and then lets it fall again. Falling as rain, the water again becomes a river. Well, how can I know that that is true? It is true, and if you do not believe it, you cannot become more than a quagmire, and even that might take many, many years. And it certainly is not the same as a stream. But can I not remain the same stream I am today? You cannot remain the same in either case, the whisper said. Your essential part is carried away and forms a stream again. You are called what you are even today because you do not know which part of you is the essential one. When it heard this, echoes began to arise in the thoughts of the stream. Dimly, it remembered a state in which it, or some part of it, had been held in the arms of a wind. It also remembered, or did it, that this was the real thing, not necessarily the obvious thing to do. And the stream raised its vapor into the welcoming arms of the wind, which gently and easily bore it upward and along, letting it fall softly as soon as they reached the roof of a mountain many, many miles away. And because it had its doubts, the stream was able to remember and record more strongly in its mind the details of the experience. The stream reflected, yes, now I have learned my true identity.
As we learned in the story, water is the great shape changer. It changes its shape to fit its container, whether that be river or glass or the great basins and landscapes of the sea. But it also changes its containers, wearing down mountains to sand as fine as powder, carving out canyons that plunge into the earth, dictating where its worshipers may live and may not. Just as water changes and is changed over time, so are we. You are invited now to share water that reminds you of the changes and transformations in your lives, your journeys, both spiritual and physical.
We do have other concerns and sorrows, I know, in our hearts, and at this time, I invite you all to join us in the third part of our water communion, when storms rush and roar. As we've seen, water is intimately tied up to not only the life of the world, but, to its depths. Water is powerful. It is endless. It is all-encompassing in its raging when it rages. Now it is time to share water, symbolizing the storms in our lives, the concerns and the sorrows, the frustrations and confusion. Allow this vessel to be one of receiving and absorbing your storm.
Our meditation words this morning are from Mary Oliver. At Blackwater Pond, the tossed waters have settled after a night of rain. I dip my cupped hands. I drink a long time. It tastes like stone, leaves, fire. It falls cold into my body, waking the bones. I hear them deep inside me whispering, "Oh, what is that beautiful thing that just happened?" Water communion. I invite you to bring forward water that reminds you of the well springs of your life, the water that sustains you when you're feeling empty, the joys that give you hope and buoy you up. You may come forward now.
At least once a year, every single year since I was a child, water communion has splashed onto the calendar with the reminder, since I became a minister, of water's 1,000 possibilities for metaphor and simile and allegory. We talk about water as a nourisher of life, a raging element, a rushing river. We say still waters run deep, and don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. We say, here we go. Inspiration dries up, right? And so does funding and passion. Why, you may have heard single folks or even people in long-distance relationships say they're in a drought. We talk about how even a drop in the bucket is better than no drop at all, and the ways that water shapes its environment and is shaped by it. On Water Communion Sunday, we love to talk about the many ways in which water comes together, a trickle, a stream, a river, strengthening as the drops merge, becoming something greater than the sum of its parts. Sometimes we look into the water, maybe a puddle, and we see our own reflection, ourselves, reflected in the mirror of the sky. There's something fascinating about reflections. They draw us in. They're interesting. Our eyes are drawn to the perfect mimicry of ourselves, and we are also attracted to those wavering edges, the ripples that smooth and disperse our reflections and change how we look. And we're shown different ways of how to be when we look into different mirrors. We see ourselves reflected not only in our own mirror, but in the faces of those around us, or we try to. Sometimes I think we look and don't see ourselves at all, and that can hurt. A young man that I know said the hardest thing about growing up gay for him was the immense silence of his family and community around being gay. It's not that people were mean about gayness, it's that he could look into the faces around him at the dinner table, in the pews of the church where his father preached, the people in his classrooms, the books and television and movie he consumed, and he never could see himself there at all. He was missing, and it felt like a part had been erased. Sometimes we look into faces with which we vehemently disagree, faces we dislike, faces we might even hate. And if we have a little humility, or sometimes we're just slapped with a little reality, we can recoil and reel back with a shock when we see our own selves reflected back at us. The first time that I was confronted with my own internalized racism, and I really felt it and understood what I had experienced and what I had perpetuated, it left a searing shame. And that still makes that memory, nearly 40 years old, powerful. I looked into a face that looked back and said, "You can do better." Sometimes we look into the mirror of family and culture and we see our own best selves there, magnified and made beautiful. Our courage and our curiosity are suddenly right there. We're seeing them clear and close. We gaze into the face of another and see an image that is foreign but perhaps attainable. If they can do it, we think, well, maybe I can too. Unitarian theologian Theodore Parker, my dead UU boyfriend. Sorry, I will say that every single time I talk about Theodore Parker. He taught that the power of Jesus' example is not in his divinity, but his humanity. If Jesus was a human like us, his rebellion and struggle have power. We can see ourselves working to heal the wounded, to challenge injustice, to break bread in peace with those who are both like us and other. We see that same possibility reflected back at us in faces that are more modern. Rosa Parks, Mahatma Gandhi, Harvey Milk, many other prophetic voices and people whose images we examine and encounter in our search to work for justice, to transform lives, to see ourselves better. We are water, people. We are water, and we're stronger together than we are alone. We have the power to nourish, and we also have the power to destroy. We are the shapers of our environment. I love my air-conditioned cocoon. And we are also inevitably shaped by the world in return. Even as we enjoy our air conditioning, we live in an area that sees drought coming. We are also in the image of the water, the reflection of what might be. We see sorrow and joy, beauty and ugliness reflected back at us in every face in the mirror, in every puddle we encounter. And it is up to us to decide what to do with those images, how to respond to them, and how to shape the reflections that others will see when they look back at us. Amen. Kayla Rice helped write this benediction. I edited it slightly. It starts with a drop, then a trickle, a burble, a rush of water, each bubbling toward its destination. And finally, the wide, endless sea. All rivers run to the sea. Today you brought water and poured it into this common bowl. Though our experiences have differed, these waters mingle and signify our common humanity. Today you came and shared in this sacred community and an ingathering. May you depart this sacred space with your hearts filled with hope for new beginnings, where rivers go forth but return to this community, where rivers of tears may be shed, where dry souls will be watered, where your joy bubbles, where your life cup overflows, where deep in your spirit you have found this place a home. All rivers run to the sea. Go in peace and have a blessed week and share this water of life.